thank you, Maya, for the introduction, and thanks for being here with us today. Our topic of this panel is DI reporting, and you might be thinking, what's wrong with that now? Because it certainly shows the progress and the commitment of organizations to tackling the DI problems in their teams. And it will get a lot of likes, love, support on LinkedIn, right? But before we go into the discussion today, I have a question for you to consider. So how many of you have thought that you were the diversity hire in the team, in the organization? Or how many of you have thought that, oh, this new hire is our diversity hire, right? Just let that sink in for a few seconds, and we'll start our conversation today. So I know Canon, Whitney, and Maxine, you are from different sectors. I know Maxine and Canon, you both in university, but in PR we always overlap with other sectors as well. Can you tell me, what are the DI reporting you're seeing in your sector and your view on those?
Well, for universities, I think there are just too many reports, basically, because universities love a report. And all the reports show that there's nothing new that we didn't know 10 or 20 years ago. There's a lack of black academics, even fewer female black professors. There's a gender pay gap issue, there's access and progression issues for among BME and working class students. And I think the reports are written in a bland way, like an office party buffet, really, beige. And there was a report written in January this year looking at growing diverse and inclusive university marketing teams. And you think about this, after all the Black Lives Matter movement, George Floyd, and the headline of the report says, we need to embed the values of EDI. That was one of the headlines, and you think, well, no shit, basically, do you know what I mean? And then it goes on saying, you have to recognize the importance of the role modeling of diverse representation. And I'm just reading this and think, you're a recognized higher education think tank, and you're peddling this rubbish to everyone. And so yeah, and I think there's just a lot of data, and I think we just don't need the data now. We don't need those many reports. We need actions take forward.
Yeah, speaking from the agency side, I think there are a couple of things that I've noticed with reports, similar to what Kenan was saying. I think oftentimes the reports are all highlighting the same thing. Diversity is either stagnating or getting worse. So CIPR, their race and PR report found that the number of BAME declined from 11% in 2015 to 8% in 2019. And CIPR, again, their state of profession shows that diversity in terms of ethnicity is getting worse again. And so to Kenan's point, we've had a number of reports, and that's not actually changing anything. And I think another issue that I find really interesting with reports is the fact that even when you look at the report, it's so biased. How can all marginalized people just be lumped in together? BAME, you're completely erasing what makes people human. And I think, again, these reports just kind of showcase how we just look at people from diverse backgrounds as just a number, as just a statistic, just to make your companies feel better about what we're doing, and we need to step past that. So yeah, I think I think for me, it also again shows a difference between, or a lack of understanding in the difference between diversity and inclusion. Diversity is a number, inclusion is something completely different, and I don't see any of these reports actually talking about what that looks like and what we can do.
And so my role sort of straddles the NHS comms sector, and last year the NHS England reported the NHS is the most diverse it's ever been. This is wonderful, pat ourselves on the back, and in fact it doesn't tell the full picture in terms of if you go up, the more senior you go up in an NHS hospital, look at the board, it's always majority white, it's always almost completely male. And also, the numbers don't tell the real story. So they'll say it's as diverse as possible, but what's the experience like? a survey by the British Medical Association surveyed 2,000 black, mixed race and Asian doctors. 76% of them said that they have experienced at least one racist incident in the last 2 years. So there's clearly an issue here. So it's looking at the things that they would think that tick boxes, this is great, we've got loads of people from diverse backgrounds into our organisations, but what's the experience showing? And that's the bit of these reports that you never get the real picture from.
Thanks. You all mentioned some numbers, and I think the numbers in those reports show the audience that there's some, there's problem in these sectors, in these organizations, and public sector loves reports. I don't know. Do you still believe in that DEI report helps to addressing the issue of diversity diversity and inclusion?
I think it's a tool. It's one tool, and I think whenever we talk about diversity and inclusion, people get very antsy and anxious about it, and we just want to have just one thing that we can say that we've done and then step away with it without actually digging into the root of what is the problem. I think, especially on agency side, in light of kind of the murder of George Floyd, we saw a lot of agencies talking about, we're creating a DE&I initiative or a committee. And the burden on that was the people of color, who most of the time are junior level. And they're not getting promoted because of this work. Oftentimes they're told that this is an additional, just, extracurricular, I've been told. And so I find it really interesting that, oftentimes we do these just these exercises that actually don't have any meaning, and you don't get a lot of buy-in from senior folks, which makes it really difficult to make any type of movement. And I think reports, again, is similar to a D&I initiative in that it's just one thing that people do without actually trying to dig into, okay, now that we've done this, now that we see diversity is crap in this industry, what do we do now?
What do you think, Maxine?
Yeah, I think I agree with Whitney in the sense that it is one tool, but I would like to see it's kind of overhauled in terms of exactly what are you reporting. It'd be interesting to look at, okay, so you've got X amount of people from diverse backgrounds in your organisation. Okay, that's the first step, recruitment. But I'd be very interested to see the retention. Where are they 3-4 years down the line? Where have they been promoted? What's the pay? Especially the racial pay gap. But it's really hard to get that information, especially from the university sector. I know that there was a recent story out about academics, and they showed that white academic would get on average a £55,000 salary. They then the BBC had to do an FOI to find out that black academics on average earn £38,000, and Asian academic will earn, someone from an Arab background will earn £37,000. That's a huge gap. I'd be interested more in that and what exactly you're going to do with that. And also, I would be more interested in what's the actual experience as well, and reporting on that, and looking beyond the numbers. I think we need to move beyond the statistics and actually drill down into what's actually happening within organisations.
Do you think the numbers are a mask of the problems? You really have to tear it up and see what's behind.
So especially if I think there's problematic lumping people together under one group, because when you do that, of course it looks good or it shows some kind of signs of progress. But then, you can't just lump us all under BAME, and then be like, okay, that's all sorted. If you have to drill down further, and everyone's experience, I'm a black woman, I'm probably going to have a different experience to Kenan, for example, or so I just think that that desire to just group us all, lump us all, and then just think, well, we've done our work, job done.
And we're not one, we're not just numbers. But, we're seeing so many, more and more organizations are releasing this type of report. And I think, the senior management team must be thinking this, I'm making progress here, I'm making commitment here. What do you think they're getting wrong there when they're releasing this type of report?
I generally think that there is sort of a cognitive disconnect with the reports. So when senior leaders, read these reports, I think the reaction is, well, in my experience, maybe I'm in the wrong organisation, but the reaction is usually oh dear, that's awful, isn't it? And we'll just put that away. Somebody else will deal with it. And they think it's fine because it's not in my organisation. They'll go around saying, well, we put some red lanterns up for Chinese New Year, it's a celebration. and it needs to be more than that. And that disconnect, I think when it goes, now what the issues might come out of it, that disconnect will slowly feed into the culture of the organizations and sort of the ways of working, and it sort of accumulates to, your staff and sort of recruitment issues. It all builds up into, something not, a culture that's not quite connecting.
Yeah, and I think Maxine and Kanan have both touched on this. I think the problem is that people from, diverse backgrounds are kind of just reduced to just like a monolith, a number without any context. Intersectionality is not represented at this. Like, personally for me, I'm a Black queer woman, and every time I enter a room, I have to navigate balance kind of what do I show, what do I do there. And when I look at a report that says, okay, we have X amount, Black women or X amount queer people, it's just like, okay, but what about the people that fall in between? Or, it's interesting because I feel like this industry is all about, telling incredible stories, and yet when we talk about the people that are doing that work, we just reduce them to a statistic. And so it's just problematic because, to your point, Kenan, it filters down to the culture of any organization, because it's like, cool, we just look at these people, we other these people, whether or not it's intentional, but you're genuinely saying, okay, we have the white people here, and then all the other people that fall within any type of umbrella, we just push them over here, and that's it. That's what we've done for them.
Well, what about you? What do you think, Maxine?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Whitney and Kenan's point, but also just like in terms of the problematic ways like this can manifest. I mean, recently, I know for International Women's Day in March, every single organisation put it on Twitter, we celebrate women, look at the amazing work that women do. And there's a bot on Twitter called International Women's Day bot. So she said, and the bot was like, if you guys are going to post your International Women's Day content and use our hashtag, I'm going to reveal your gender pay gap. So this is publicly available information. So that's what they did. And it was really interesting to see companies like, how do I react to this? So some of them just like delete the post. Some of them reposted and tried to use a different hashtag so it wouldn't come up. And then others just like completely ignored it. So it's just interesting, like, how it plays its way out as well. Like if you're not really doing anything to address these things and just like relying on reports and then just not moving things along, how you're going to have to be accountable for this. People are going to call you out on it and stuff. And it was interesting seeing the reaction of companies because they really didn't have anything to say, really. Like, how can you be celebrating women? And in some companies, the gender pay gap was 40-50%. So really, it was just, your one day to like, women exist. And then, and then just like, oh.
Yeah, it's not about the words that they put out there. Whitney, I think you mentioned just now that, because they're putting out this kind of report and organizations tend to hire more people into the junior level. And I think during the Z course, we also heard some people saying like, we have people from diversity background, a lot of them in our hired in now, so it won't be a problem 10 years later. What do you think of that? Would there be a problem 10 years later?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really interesting because, again, I feel like it's this issue that people just want to be like, I think we're really good at talking about progress when we talk about, flying cars, electric cars, but when we're talking about equity for people, it's like, let's wait 5 to 10 years. That's fine, that's fine. And I think what's really interesting is that oftentimes, in my personal experience, I've been the junior level person, and I have not stayed for a long time because it's like you have these junior people come in, you create a culture where there is no space for them to actually feel like they're meaningfully contributing. You create this culture of trauma and fear and burnout. And so all these junior level people that you have that you're putting in your metrics when you talk about the number of diverse people in your company, within a year or two, they end up leaving. And I think that's something that whenever I hear people saying, let's bring them in young, and then like they'll make their way up their ladder, it rarely ever happens like that. And I think this is why the ZEC is so important, because I've seen so many like initiatives about getting junior people in comms, and it's like, we don't necessarily need that. What we need is more senior people from diverse backgrounds who can actually make a difference, create culture or they have the voice to make sure that the culture is actually inclusive, and it's not just cool. We have someone in for 6 months, they end up leaving because they're not a culture fit, and then we kind of start all over again, and everyone's just shrugging their shoulders like, well, we tried.
Oh, it's interesting to see that, the impact of these kind of thing on people on the ground. I don't know if you see, similar different thing in in university?
I've never seen an initiative, an EDI initiative, that has been sort of delivered from like the junior staff up. I've never seen an initiative, or even worse, I've never seen an initiative that a senior team have supported and sort of allowed that initiative to develop and sustain itself. It's always a one-off project, and I think that's sad. Going with your point, I think that is needed. That the senior leadership needs to have some accountability and to sort of see those projects through. And it's a long-term investment of time, and I don't think senior leaders actually get that yet.
What about your university or NHS space that you see?
Yeah, similar. I think there is a reliance that, especially within the university, of bringing in people at a junior level and they're wise to the top, and that's not the case. I mean, I'm the only black comms manager in our team, and I've been there for a while. So, you can bring in all the junior people you want, but people are going to want to be promoted. People are going to want to have more challenges. They will want to develop. So if there's not that opportunity or that environment, and they see other people, their white colleagues developing, and they're still at the same grade, people will leave and stuff. And I think there is that over-reliance on bringing in, because that seems the easier thing, just bring junior people in, it's less money, it's okay, and they'll rise to the top. But also, support for senior managers who are not white. I think that's really important too, because we're ambassadors. We're carrying a lot. We're ambassadors for people who look like us and stuff, and the people who like, oh, I could be that. I could get to that level. And so what's the support where you're in a room and you're trying to push these diversity and inclusion policies in a majority white space, and then you're feeling sidelined, ignored, or dismissed? And I think that also brings its own trauma or feeling of needing to assimilate or just not speaking up. So that brings its own issues as well. So what's the support for people like us who do get to the senior levels and stuff within an organisation? I think that's another thing that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, before we get to how can we improve this problem, and ask another question, who do you think, if these reports are not working for people from diversity background, what do you think these reports are for? Canon?
I'm gonna say lazy leaders. I can even go as far as saying lazy white leaders. So I'm sorry if I've offended anyone. I have been up since 4 o'clock, so I'm quite blunt. But I think the reports are written in such a way that it's sort of palatable and sort of non-offensive. And organisations tend to pat themselves on the back. And they always spin the data. They have to make all these disclaimers to usually make the senior team feel good or look good. And I'm worried, it's always the organisations are in sort of the middle of the pack. So you've got organisations that are doing extremely well about EDI, so they can share their best practice. Those at the bottom going, oh my God, I need to do something about it. But it's those middle organisations who are complacent with the stats are coming out. So they'll spin the data to say, oh, we're just above average in our competitor set, or we're top of our quartile. And you think, well, what does that mean? So I think the reports are written to sort of appease senior leaders and stakeholders. So it doesn't help to bring out the voices that the reports represent. And I think, as with most things, if people aren't directly impacted, they don't see the work, and it fails on those who do see and experience it, the negative.
Then, we see these problems with the report, it's a tick box exercise, people have done it, pat on the back, move on. How can we move away from this problematic, narrative? How can organizations or public sector or private sector move away from this?
I think Maxine touched on this earlier. I think it's about reframing what these reports are really doing and what kind of data we want. I think we over-index on quantitative data, so we want to have X amount of black, X amount of brown, but we're not actually getting into, okay, cool, the people that we have from these backgrounds, what is their experience? If they're leaving, why are they leaving? another member of our cohort, when we were kind of talking about this panel, talked about kind of the maternity leave policy. You know, most companies have one, but we can't necessarily base how inclusive an organization is based on whether they have that. What would really be interesting is to understand how many women or parents are taking that leave. If they're not, why aren't they? How many are coming back? And when they come back, how long do they stay? And I think we need to drill down into, again, it's so interesting because our whole industry is about stories and asking really great questions, but we're not asking great questions in these reports. We're just asking the bare minimum. And it could be out of ignorance, could be, but it could also be out of fear of once we have those answers and we actually have to do something about it.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Whitney said as well, which I completely agree with. It's hearing from the voices and bringing those voices. A couple of years ago, I know that our organisation, we've got a race equality group at our organisation. They commissioned a report, like hearing about the experience of black members of academic staff as well as administrative staff. And it was, and you know, I mean, I wasn't shocked by what was said, but I think people, wider institution was like, oh, this is literally happening in our institution, like just horrific incidences of racism, opportunities for promotion, like just not there, or just being told you're definitely not getting promoted, just things like that. And it was, I think having it written down in black and white for people to, you know, hear those experiences, and at the same time we're a global university, we are inclusive, we attract students from all over the world, they're going to have a great time, we're in London, and then people within your organisation are saying, you know, we've been through some horrific experiences, and you know, it doesn't match the stuff. So more of that, I think, you know, and then not just hearing from actually action in it, like what are we actually going to do to make this a better experience for people coming into
After
work.
that report, like people reading that report, after that initial shock, was there anything done that you saw?
I give credit. There have been things done, you know, and it's not just about announcing new initiatives and plans and stuff. I think a commitment to really report against it. What have these initiatives actually achieved? And giving yourself a target and giving yourself accountability. So not just like we do big stories around, so we've just launched a £20 million scholarship programme for black students, so we attract them especially in areas such as engineering and things like that. Okay, that's great, big bells and whistles, but I'll be interested to see what happens 5 years down the line and stuff. Where are these students? Have they gone on to do PhDs? Have they gone into academic careers? You know, what was the experience like for them at university, at our institution over the last 5 years and stuff? That will be more interesting and stuff, and have we brought in more students, and what will happen once the money is up after the 5 years and things like that. That would be more impactful than just like, you know, I think we're very good at like just announcing things and then you don't hear about them ever again.
This reminded me, I was at a senior meeting and they were talking about diversity of diversifying the student body with this particular school, and they said, oh, what are you going to do? And the head of school said, oh yeah, we're going to launch a scholarship scheme. I said, oh, that's brilliant. How many scholarships are you offering? Just the one. It's like, oh, okay. I'm sure you get more applicants than just one student.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting because you talk about that. I do feel as though even when these initiatives are kind of done, it's just like, okay, cool, like this is just a drop in the pool, you know? It's like we need to, and this is how I also feel about junior level people. It's like you bring in these junior level people from diverse backgrounds and you have all of these expectations about what can they do to make the company super inclusive when they're just out of university. And then it's like there's this pressure, and I think that's something that I personally can speak to. It's just like, as a person of color, when you feel that tokenization, it's just like, cool, so everything is on my shoulders, but then I'm held to like ridiculous standards in addition to managing agency side, 5 to 6 clients, trying to be the culture ambassador, also trying to find my place, deal with the fact that on any given day we're seeing like horrific things, like out of the States we saw in Buffalo, 10 people getting shot by a murderer. It's just, it feels as though there's so many external things that we have to deal with as just a marginalized people. And then at work, it's just, if you can't hit that, if you can't be that exceptional person of color, or that exceptional token, then it's just like, okay, cool, you're not good enough and you're not gonna get promoted. And I just feel like then we do like, we do these like one scholarship for someone, or we bring on 5 people of color on an internship program when you have 200 white people at your agency. So I just feel as though when you look at it that way, it shouldn't be this thing where we just give it to the exceptional person from a diverse background. It should be we're truly trying to create an industry that accepts everyone, whether they're mediocre or they're exceptional. Because I mean, we have mediocre white people. So why can't we create the platform for mediocre, black people or brown people? Equal opportunity mediocrity.
It is ridiculous to see teams that having diversity problems like pushing the responsibility to people from diversity background. Like, if you're not doing it, it's your problem. That's that's definitely interesting to see. I think you touched on these kind of report. It does reveal problems, and then it's just that these organizations who reveal this report should be taken accountable for tracking the record after I think ESG is going on this track. Like if you release a carbon neutral report, you actually need to publish your progress as well, and how is measured, how is calculated, what's the measures you've taken, right? So I think in DI it should be the same thing, but I think, Canon, you said we don't need any more report. There is already too many report in universities. Like, if you think reporting is not the solution, what can be done to help improve the diversity?
I think it's more about what goes into that report. Because I think people who create these reports, I think, need to be reminded that the stats and the narrative that they're representing, that they are giving a platform or sort of be a loudspeaker for each community. I think that's always forgotten. And I think it's wrong to package it up into this sort of this plain and bland narrative, and it shouldn't be to appease that leader who thinks everything is fine. I think that human voice needs to come through really strongly, not just the numbers and stats.
I think this echoes our previous panel as well, like the human relations in this, in reporting and when you hire someone or when you promote someone. What would you like to say, Whitney and Maxine, in this space?
I think to Kenon's point, it's the same thing. I want reports that, I guess 2 things. I want reports that actually dig into why the number keeps going down or staying the same. And I also want to see action taken. Like in agencies, I mean, for example, if we have a metric, like we have to get 5 pieces of coverage and we don't hit it one quarter, you best believe that the next quarter we're like, cool, what are we gonna do to make that happen? Let's exceed it. So I wanna see that level of like proactivity and like enthusiasm to, cool, we had these crap numbers, what are we gonna do so that this time next year, we have the number fine, we have, 15%, whatever, different groups like queer, black, brown, trans, and then we're talking about, okay, cool, how has that experience changed? What are the issues that we still need to dig into? Actual effort in addressing this issue rather than just putting it out there and just seeing what happens with it.
Yeah, and I want to see more talking about the experience, the retention, the promotion of staff. I want something that the things that are uncomfortable that, you're going to have to face, like the pay gap, the racial pay gap. You're just going to, it shouldn't take an FOI from a journalist for some organisations to reveal this information. It's very important for people to know that. So I would like that, and I also want like proper accountability in terms of what it is you're going to do and how is that going to be, and that's in evidence based on your data, not just something that you just plucked from from something else. Oh, this looks good, but you can't have a one-fit-all approach and stuff. So what might work in one company might not work in another and stuff. So it's got to be relevant to your actual organisation as well.
I think we're getting to the end of the discussion today. If you have 1 minute to make your closing remarks, what will you say? What do you think like the agencies or in-house teams they can take into action?
No pressure.
So I think I think don't forget, like beyond the stats and the narrative, I think there are people, and I'm sure there are people in your organisations or your companies are sort of screaming out to be heard. I think find a way to listen to them, understand them, and that will just give you that richer insights of what to do next, rather than just your annual report. Don't spin. Be honest of your flaws, and I think the important thing is, like, don't forget that these reports might be like the only mechanism that that staff can see themselves represented. So I think don't forget that, because that might be just the only thing that will show them that they are being sort of listened to, and I think you just need to improve on it.
That's a powerful point.
That was a really good point, Kenan. Took my points. I think the thing that I want to take away is that this conversation, I think we've all touched on this, is it's going to be messy, it's going to be uncomfortable. There's still, on any given day, there's something new to be learned, and we're going to mess up, and that's okay. I think the issue is when you're not willing to kind of do that self-reflection and figure out why this is a mess up, or even step outside yourself and see, where is my privilege? Because we all have privilege. It's not just white privilege. There is, privilege of education, privilege of where you live, even moving here, privilege of accent. So I think it's just taking a step outside of yourself and not just thinking about, oh, how does this make my company look, but, oh, how does this make the people within my organization who are from diverse backgrounds feel?
I think organisations, just workplace culture, really taking a look at your culture. You can hire all the diverse people you want, but if you've got a workplace where you can't thrive, you can't be who you can't be authentic, you have to assimilate, people are just going to leave. So that's just putting a plaster, not fixing the actual problem. So that's a main thing for me. Also, I think you just need to be explicit about the promotion and how that happens, and like the routes to promotion and stuff. That sometimes it's not spelled out and stuff, and that's really important too. And just finally for me, like, this work can't just be left to people of colour to, we're already carrying a lot, so to then expect us to fix a problem we didn't create in the first place is problematic. There are plenty of DE&I specialists and stuff. Hire them. Don't it? Because often this sort of labour is uncompensated on top of incredibly busy jobs. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you find this session helpful. There's certainly a lot to take away today, and thanks for being here with me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scarlett.
Thanks, Carla.